I do want to just take a moment to talk about Donald Trump and, of course, the Iran deal that he has signed. Signed this in Versailles last night. Sanctions lifted, oil flowing, stocks up. But the Iranians who took to the streets, risking their lives back at the beginning of the year, were not protesting for cheaper oil. They wanted freedom. They wanted regime change. Has Trump really ended a war or simply propped up the regime that actually started it? Let's speak to Potkin Azarmehr, British-Iranian journalist, senior fellow, investigative project on terrorism. Potkin, good afternoon. Nice to have you with us again. Here's the bit that concerned me, and maybe you can tell me whether I'm right or wrong on this one. I keep hearing Donald Trump say things like, this regime, it's so much better than the old regime. These guys know what they're doing and they're up for a deal, etc. Two things that I took away from that was, number one, I didn't think there was meant to be a deal at the beginning of all of this. This wasn't really about carving out a deal with anyone. But secondly, this new regime does have quite a lot of echoes to the old regime, particularly the fella in charge, who's literally the son of the last guy in charge. Good afternoon to you. Nice to have you with us.
Good afternoon, Ian. Look, I can understand that a lot of the opponents of the regime may be despondent. I can understand people that sympathise with the Iranians who came under street, like yourself, like myself, may be despondent by this memorandum of understanding. And it looks like a lot of concessions have been given to the Islamic Republic of Iran and not much gained. But let's not forget, at the end of the day, this is not a deal. This is an MoU. It's a memorandum of understanding. It's not a treaty or agreement. It's less binding and it's more limited than a treaty. The truth is that both sides needed a break. They needed a respite from the conflict. Now, I think the audience watching the show at the moment, they understand the American and its Western allied side of it when I say they need the respite. But also the regime desperately needed a break because you mentioned the son of the previous leader. He hasn't been seen since the war began.
Yeah, I don't think he's in very good condition from everything we know, if that makes sense.
Well, we don't even know if he's alive, to be honest with you, Ian, because, look, there hasn't been a video of him, there hasn't been an audio of him, there hasn't even been a handwritten note from him. Yeah. And they needed to bury the previous supreme leader, his father, Ali Khamenei. They're going to do that in the coming days of July to coincide with the holy Shiite month of Muharram. During that funeral, they have to show Mujtaba Khamenei. If he doesn't even show up in his father's funeral, there's going to be more pressure on whoever is ruling Iran at the moment as to where he is and how come all these statements are coming, saying that, these are on behalf of the new leader, but no one knows where he is and he doesn't even turn up for his father's funeral. Yeah. And there's very deep problems within the regime that has exasperated after the war. I remember the last time I talked to you, Ian, I was saying that the Achilles heel of the regime is economy. Look, they're very good at war, they're very good at conflict, they're very good at putting down protests and repression, they love crisis. Their Achilles heel is the economy and the peacetime management of Iran. Yeah. Now, imagine the shape that the economy of Iran was before the war, when we last spoke, and where it is now. I mean, look, 25% of the infrastructure has been destroyed. And that's not me saying it. That is a regime, an insider expert who said it on the state's affiliated media platform, said it, that 25% of the infrastructure is destroyed. They're going to have serious energy problems. So there's a 60 days time limit to this memorandum of understanding. Who knows what's going to happen in the 60 days? Up to that 60 days, and who knows what's going to happen after that 60 days. So let's not be too despondent. The regime has got very, very serious problems that are going to be exacerbated after the war.
There will be many people, understandably, Potkin, looking at what happened at the beginning of the year. Potentially 40,000 people lost their lives at the hands of that regime. There was a view at that time from some who were very enthusiastic and hopeful that Iran was literally about to change. Pahlavi waiting in the wings to take control, a more secular country. That's how it was. That's what many people were hoping for. This arrangement, whatever we want to call it, between the Iranians and Trump, doesn't appear to be doing any of that. And what does it say for those 40,000 that lost their lives?
Yeah, I think the Iranian opposition, especially the Iranian opposition outside Iran, always get a bit too enthusiastic every time there is an uprising in Iran, thinking that the regime is going to collapse tomorrow. And they start promising all these things about who's going to come to power, etc., etc. But I think what we should learn from the 5 major uprisings that have happened in Iran in the last 20 years is that it's better to go concession by concession, rather than sort of like thinking, right, this is it, tomorrow the regime is going to collapse. Let's get concession by concession. This is exactly what happened in the 1979 Islamic Revolution. They weren't chanting death to the Shah right from the beginning. Yeah. They got concession at a time from the previous regime, up to a point where they looked back and they thought, right, we've given all the concessions. We've released all the political prisoners, all the terrorists from prisons, and, we've given all the concessions that the revolutionaries want. The Shah has apologized on state TV, saying that I've heard the voice of your revolution. And then it was too late for the regime to resist. And so we have to look at this in a long-term view, that the regime is getting weaker and weaker, and its support is getting less and less. In fact, this time it's had to rely on its support, not so much inside Iran, but outside Iran. The fanatical Shia population outside Iran who look at the Islamic Republic as a shelter for themselves. And this manifested itself in Iran bringing 15,000 of its Shia proxies from Iraq to man the checkpoints to make sure there's no more protests during the war. So, let's not look at this as sort of like, right now the regime has survived. And that's exactly the narrative that the regime is saying. Because they survived, they say they're victorious. They have survived, but they're not victorious.
Do you think then, Potkin, from what you're saying, that this regime is likely to sort of naturally implode? Is that what you're suggesting here?
I think so, because, look, at the end of the day, this is an archaic regime. This is a regime which is not compatible with, this time and age. And I've always likened it to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union didn't collapse by people coming on the streets to protest overthrow it. Sure. The Soviet regime just collapsed because it just couldn't cope with the demands of the society. And all these underlying reasons why the protests happen, and they haven't gone away. Even, within this 60 days, even if money is injected into the regime, it still doesn't, because the institutional corruption that's within the regime, it still doesn't mean that the regime is going to make things well for everyone. So, let's not get too despondent. This is just a memorandum of understanding. It's not a treaty. It's less binding and it's more limited. And, let's come back again within, next 60 days and see where we are.
I mean, back to what many people thought then at the beginning of all of this, that this was going to be a revolution that looked as if something was about to give, and it never really did. Are we going to see the exiled crown prince back in Iran, running the show? Will it look like this secular country that many people have craved? Is there a timeline you could even put on that?
Totalitarian regimes are difficult to overthrow with a revolution. It's like, the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. You couldn't overthrow with a revolution. You couldn't overthrow the Nazis in Germany with a revolution. Totalitarian regimes either evolve or they implode. And I've always said street violence is their playing field. They're very good at violence. The ordinary Iranian people can never match the violence of the regime. So when it comes to trying to overthrow the regime with street protests, it's always going to be difficult. But look, don't write off any of the alternative that we've just mentioned. Still anything is possible, because the underlying problems between the regime and the people hasn't gone away. The people of Iran are pro-Western people that want a secular country. They're fed up with all these restrictions that they have on their personal lifestyle, etc., etc. And none of these underlying reasons have gone away because of this MoU.
Well, we will speak again, Potkin. It's always enlightening to speak with you and get your take on these things. Thank you for your time. Potkin Azarmehr, British-Iranian journalist, senior fellow of the Investigative Project on Terrorism. Thank you to him. There's a lot in that. So, overarching headline, I think, is that this will happen, but it will happen more organically rather than some chronology that you could set out now. A week on Tuesday, new regime. A week on Thursday, X, Y, Z. I hear what he's saying. It's his area of expertise. Your responses to that as well.